Look, are you in mortgage stress? Do you have an interest-only loan? How are you going? Up to 1 million Australian households could be in danger of missing mortgage repayments by September. That's the warning from my next guest, Martin North. He's the Principal of Digital Finance Analytics. Martin, good morning.
Hello, Jane.
Martin, this is quite a grim warning that you've been issuing. Tell us why you fear that so many Australians might be heading for the edge of mortgage default.
Yeah, so we've been looking at our household surveys. We run household surveys through the year, and we look at households and their income and expenditure. And what we notice is that essentially the costs of living are going up significantly when incomes are not. And then if we overlay mortgages and mortgage repayments on top of that, we estimate that at the moment around 970,000 households across Australia are typically what we call in mortgage stress. In other words, they don't really have enough income coming in to be able to cover all the costs, including the mortgage repayment. Now, unfortunately, it's likely that we're going to see interest rate rises in the next few months on mortgages simply because of the bank funding costs going up, and that's due to international and local issues. But that means that we're going to see more households sort of sliding closer to this rather sticky edge where effectively they don't have the money coming in. And in Western Australia, for example, there are around 400,000 households with a mortgage, an unoccupied mortgage, and about 130,000 of those are likely to be in mortgage stress. And in fact, there are 10 postcodes where about a quarter of those households live. So it's not uniformly spread across the state.
And when you talk about the 130,000 people in mortgage stress in Western Australia, Martin, of course, the other thing is a lot of people who bought in the boom are seeing the value of their property diminishing from what they paid if they bought at the height of the boom. That's another issue, isn't it?
Well, it is, because essentially what happens at the moment is if you get into difficulty and ultimately default and have to sell, in some places you're able to sell and get out with your shirt because essentially prices have gone up. But in WA, where prices have gone sideways or indeed backwards in some areas, there are many more people who are currently dealing with what we call negative equity. In other words, there's not enough capital in the property to cover the mortgage. So those households are really caught because essentially they're seeing interest rates rise, so their repayments are going up, but they can't sell. And unfortunately, that's the sort of rather dramatic situation that I think we're going to see an increased number of households, moving towards. Not immediately, but there's no light on the horizon because there's just no way I can see incomes rising anytime soon. And by the way, I think property prices are going to continue sideways in Western Australia for a little time.
So do I, and I disagree with reports that say we've been hearing this for a while now. We're on the precipice. Things are about to improve, and I just can't see it. I can't see it with the unemployment rate the way it is and the stories that we're hearing from people. So off the back of the Banking Royal Commission, Martin, when you look at this and you look at the number of people who might have had interest-only loans, who are now in negative equity, how is this going to play out? Because the banks are really on the nose, aren't they?
Well, they certainly are. And it's clear from the Royal Commission that there were a number of people that were sold loans that were not suitable for them. And a lot of those were interest-only loans. And so I think there's a few things that may come out of this. The first is that it could well be that people start going back to the banks and saying, actually, the loan you offered me was not unsuitable. Now, if it can be proved that it's not unsuitable, then, there could be legal cases and all sorts of those sorts of things and legal action, right? And I'm not sure whether the Royal Commission will make specific recommendations to change the legislation, but I don't think they need to, because what we've seen is that banks effectively have been sliding around the law and in some cases breaking the law, and just people have been persuaded to get loans they should never have got. And just to give you an idea, 15, 20 years ago, the loan-to-income ratio, in other words, how much income versus the loan you got, was about 3 to 3.5 times. Now it's closer to 6 to 6.5. That is not sustainable. So we have effectively a whole bunch of issues that have created this pressure. And I think the Royal Commission has shone a light on the poor behaviour of the banks and the fact that households have, loans they probably should never have got. And of course, the bigger loans drove house prices up. So effectively, credit availability is the thing that actually drives home prices up way more than, say, migration or even, other factors. It is credit related completely that really is driving it. So that's the sort of the situation. Now, how's it going to play out? I think that we're going to see rates continuing to rise a little bit. We're going to see incomes flat. We're going to see more pressure on households and on the banks. And I wouldn't be surprised to see some of these turning into cases that go to law in due course.
Yeah, and look, we've got the cost of living going up too here in Western Australia. It's going, I don't know a state or territory where the cost of living is going down, so we're all on that bandwagon. Martin, for people listening, and, you know, I really feel for people who found themselves in deep mortgage stress, particularly, you know, if you've got an interest-only loan and you're looking at maybe defaulting by September and feeling deeply stressed about it. This must be a terrible situation. I've been in mortgage stress myself, and there's nothing like those sleepless nights where you think, how the heck am I going to get out of this? What sort of help can people, you know, what can assist people? What can people do rather than thinking that they are helpless? Surely, now that we understand off the back of this Royal Commission what's been happening, surely there is an avenue other than legal action that people can prepare. Should they contact their bank and say they're in trouble and get themselves some leeway?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. One of the things that from my surveys that I find is that many people are really scared about realising the situation they're in and talking to their bank. Now, actually, the first thing is that people often are not clear about how deeply they're in because they don't have a budget and they don't know what they're spending and they actually don't know what income's coming in. So the first advice I would say is draw up a budget. See what it is that you've got, money coming in, money going out, because then you can start making decisions about how to manage that, because there are things you can probably do on a sort of weekly basis to sort of trim the budget. Secondly, look at your debts and look at particularly the high interest debts on credit cards and those things, because if you're paying big interest on those, cut up your cards and stop spending is quite a good strategy. And, you know, I know that's tough, but actually maybe that's a good thing to do, because effectively high interest is a real problem, particularly on credit cards. And then thirdly, if you are in difficulty and if you believe that you've got pressures ahead, talk to your bank. There's a hardship scheme that all the banks have. They're legally obliged to speak with you and to work with you if you are in hardship. And so my advice would be, as soon as you begin to recognise some of the symptoms that, you know, there isn't enough money coming in to cover everything and the mortgage payment is at risk, talk to your lender. They have things that they can do. They can help restructure the debt potentially. They can even waive interest or capitalise interest to help people through. Go talk to them rather than just sit in a corner and just hope it will get right later, because in my experience, the longer you leave it, the worse it gets.
It's a really difficult conversation to have, isn't it, Martin? It's humiliating for people, it's frightening, and I guess I feel like we have to say this: don't go somewhere else to some payday lender. Don't go somewhere else and try and get some money from someone else. That's an important message too, isn't it?
Well, it is, because, yes, people will tend perhaps to do what may appear illogical but easy. You know, you can look on the web and say, oh, I can get a short-term loan to see me through and that sort of thing. Remember that with incomes flat, right, there's no get-out-of-jail card here. So this isn't just sort of a month or two, right? The chances are that if you're in difficulty now, you'll be in difficulty down the track too. And actually just reaching for short-term loans, or even just refinancing the mortgage, which is what other people would perhaps recommend. Be really careful about that, because you can end up effectively expending further money to refinance and then find that a few months later you're in precisely the same position. So it needs to be a little bit of thought applied to it rather than just looking for that easy fix. There is no easy fix. But the good news is there are things that you can do, and if you recognise the issue and begin to start managing it, you can begin to turn the ship around before it gets too late.
Good to speak to you today, Martin. Thank you.
Good to talk to you.
There he is, Martin North. He's the Principal of Digital Finance and Analytics.